are you in our session? I don't see you in the chat.
Do you listen me?
Yes, yeah. Much better, much better.
Very good.
Sí, antes te escuchábamos, pero como que rebotaba.
Ah.
Okay. All right, can everyone see us and hear us? Hopefully. I might have to, that's the sound you're making.
Okay,
Was
they
that
can hear you.
I'm not sure what that means. Everyone can hear us, so we're just sitting here in silence, not saying anything. I'm sorry, I don't really know what it looks like. And I am the administrator here trying to make this work. There we go. Hopefully that's a bit better. Can you see all four of us now a little better? Well, it's the end of the day, so hopefully you'll be a bit forgiving on that matter. Cool. So let's just begin. We're still waiting on one more panelist. I'm just going to open, and then hopefully we can get Rebecca Reed, our other speaker, on board. We'll figure out where she has gone. I'm just going to introduce myself first, introduce the panel. So my name is Kathleen. I'm a senior lecturer, and I am a craft beer searcher or beer researcher at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. And I'll be moderating this session, Grainfather International Women's Panel with BSG Craft. And before we get started, I just want to give a big thanks to Grainfather and BSG Handcraft, who are sponsors of the weekend's event, and for putting this awesome panel together. I'm told it's the first ever conference panel of female-identified homebrewers from around the world talking in one space, so that seems pretty special. And welcome, thanks for joining us. Just really quickly, in terms of the formalities, I'm sure everyone has this down already, but please post any questions that you have in the question box, upvote the ones that you like, and we'll address them throughout the talk, and if not, at the end. Other comments and links can go into the chat box. So I thought we would begin by turning things over to the panelists, allowing them to each introduce themselves. And we will start with Sarah Pantry, if you wouldn't mind telling us who you are, why you are here, and if it's relevant, what are you drinking?
Sure, I'm Sarah Pantry. I'm from the UK. I'm currently the BJCP assistant rep covering UK and Ireland. Very passionate homebrewer. From my homebrewing credentials, I won the UK National the time before last. What else do I do? I've got a YouTube channel where I like to talk about beer and homebrewing, and I run the Welsh National Homebrew Competition. So they're my homebrew credentials. I like to homebrew, and when I'm not talking homebrew, if you follow me online, you'll probably see me talking tech as well. So if you follow for the beer, you might stay for the tech, or vice versa. If you want to know about motivations, my main motivation for getting into home brewing was because I couldn't buy the beers I wanted to drink. So the only way to get hold of them was to brew them. So that's me.
Excellent. Nice to meet you. And Carolina, sorry.
Well, I speak in Spanish, yes.
Yes,
Daniela
sorry,
is
we have.
Yes. Bueno, yo soy Carolina Pérez, soy de Argentina. Tengo una formación de muchos años en el área de cervecera, o sea, yo comencé en el milenio pasado, o sea, estoy hablando de 1996, o sea, bastantes años. Can you translate?
Yeah, please. I don't want to forget everything you said. Well, she's Carolina. She's from Argentina, and well, she has like many years of experience in beer industry. She started in 1996. I forgot something that you said. Please remind me, because
No, this is okay.
it was okay. Okay.
Yes.
I can add some stuff that I know about you.
Yo comencé al revés. Yo comencé primero en la industria cervecera y después me volqué a la craft.
She started backwards. Sorry, I don't want to forget what you're saying. She started backwards. She started like in the beer industry, and then she started homebrewer because she's a chemical engineer.
Conocí la industria craft a través de mi marido en el 2004, a través de un grupo de homebrewers que me pidieron capacitarlos, o sea, a mí me gusta mucho la educación.
She discovered homebrewing in 2004 because her husband started to have reunions with a group of homebrewers, so he started homebrewing, and they asked her to give them her knowledge about sensory analysis. She had worked in a brewery as quality control, specifically in sensory evaluation, and so the homebrewer asked her to train them to improve their products.
En el 2009 rendí el examen del BJCP con el grupo de cerveceros y teníamos también cerveceras, sí. En habla hispana fue la primera vez.
In 2009, she did the BJCP exam. It was the first one in Spanish with the first group of brewers.
Great, thank you so much. We have to move on, but we'll come back to you, I promise. Our third panelist is Rebecca Reed. Sorry about that. We had a little bit of trouble getting everyone on board, but now you are here. So would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you're drinking?
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. I'm sorry that I came so late to the party, everybody.
No worries.
It's first thing in the morning here, so no, I'm not having a drink as yet, but I will be indulging in a delicious IPA a little later. So my name is Rebecca. I'm from a small regional town in Australia by the name of Lismore in the Northern Rivers region. I've been brewing for the last 6-7 years or so. I also am a craft beer retailer, having purchased a small independent craft beer shop 12 months ago. I would actually just like to take a minute, if I can, to say thank you to BSG and to Bevie for supporting the event and everyone behind the scenes that's got this event together. I can't tell you how incredibly excited I am to be chatting with women from all over the world about beers. So thank you very, very much for getting on board. And thank you, Kathleen, for moderating as well.
My pleasure. Well, thank me when it's over. We'll see how it goes. So, and Daniela, would you like to introduce yourself as well? We have Daniela translating here for Carolina.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't prepared for that.
That's
I'm
okay.
from Brewer. I'm from Argentina too, and I live in Seattle right now. Like
awesome.
a year ago, I guess.
And are you drinking anything?
Oh well, I had my view prepared and I forgot to bring it up, and I didn't want to go. Maybe I will have it delivered. Maybe you will see a man bringing a beer. I'm drinking water right now, but it's a clean glass. Today is clean glass day, so
very nice. Might as well. Well, while I'm banging on about my part, you can just get up and run. You know, we'll be missing much. So thanks so much, all of you, for joining us today. I was asked to just talk very briefly about how I was invited onto this panel because I am actually not a home brewer. The extent of my brewing has been some kombucha that's now moldy in my garage. But I have been writing and researching women in craft beer for the past few years. I am writing a book called The Gendered Labor of Craft Beer, One of the Boys, that's due out in 2022. So if you're interested in participating, I would love to hear from you, popping my contact details in the chat box right now. Basically, I'll share with you a little bit of my findings and kind of what the scope of the project's about, and then how that translates into this panel and homebrewing. But basically, if you were at the previous talk by Teresa McCullough, then you know that beer history is women's history, and that history very much starts from a homebrewing context. And that's been the starting point of my own research as well. And lately, in the past few years, there's been a lot of talk, mostly media hype, about how women are re-entering brewing through craft beer in the craft beer industry. And, you know, you see headlines every now and again that are like, wow, women are brewing beer. Isn't that great? There's so many of us and we're growing. But I think that most of us who are in the industry, and probably those of you who do home brewing, would probably agree it's still, in terms of numbers and even the culture of feeling, it's still predominantly male dominated, if not a masculine industry. So one of my questions is, do the numbers live up to the hype? And what I'm finding is that there's almost no research or any real good data or reliable data on the number of women in craft beer. Or home brewing for that matter. And so one of the things that I did as part of my book project is I spent my summer, which is the North American winter, coding all of the owners of every New Zealand craft beer brand and every every Australian craft beer brand. And basically what I found is that I'll try and keep the stats short. I'm in the process of visualizing these, so I'm happy to share that when I have it. And if you want these numbers, just message me. But in New Zealand, we have 180 craft beer brands that we identified. And of 180 brands, one is 100% woman-owned. And so that puts it basically at 0.56% of all New Zealand craft beer brands are owned by women. I also coded for the brewer in charge, or the head brewer of all of those 180 brands. And in terms of head brewers in charge, 6% have women brewing in head brewing roles. In Australia, the numbers are not much better. Of 615 craft beer brands, only 6 are women owned, meaning less than 1%. 0.97% to be exact, and only 5.8% of craft beer brands in Australia have women as female identified as head brewers. Finally, in terms of the US, there was no way I was coding the US. No way. There's like some 8,000 breweries. It would have taken me like 17 years. And so we did find a statistic from the 2018 Brewery Owner and Employee Diversity Survey, which is a sample done by the Brewers Association. It was a sample of 350 brands, and those numbers found that 2% of breweries are 100% women-owned, so 2% in America. So the numbers are pretty similar across the board, less than 2%, less than 1%. And so just to wrap up my bit of this, what I'm quite interested in is, what does this say about the brewing industry, about the visibility of women in brewing, which I've gone around to all 3 countries and have been interviewing women in various production roles. And one of the things that I have found is that there's kind of this paradox around the notion of visibility. Like, how do we make women more visibility in craft beer? And what stories do women tell when they are visible? And so I'm unpacking all of that. But one of the conundrums that I have found is that there's kind of this double bind that we get placed in. If women attempt to make themselves too visible, then they risk being sort of branded as a girl's beer or girly beer, or conversely as, some bitchy feminist that is alienating to men. If we aren't making ourselves visible and sort of just having a neutral brand, not really putting ourselves out there, then obviously we reproduce things as they already are. And so that's kind of sort of where my research lies, is what are some of the ways in which we can overcome those barriers. And I can talk about getting beyond just the gendered construct as well, but not right now. And so, yeah, I'm also looking at what barriers to entry there are to becoming more visible, to getting more women in the industry. And that's where my role or interest in homebrewing comes in. A lot of women that I've spoken to got their start in homebrewing. That's how I ended up on this panel. I spoke with someone in New Zealand who works for Bevie, who put me in touch with the panel because of our conversation that we had about the number of women in homebrewing and how that can be a pathway to the industry. So in order to sort of move from my research in craft beer to your all's experience in homebrewing, I will just now put the question to you. How did you discover homebrewing, and why did you become involved in it? And Sarah, why don't we start with you?
Sure. As I mentioned in my introduction, it was mainly a case of I like drinking beer. And if you like drinking beer, you go to the pubs. I can't talk for all countries, obviously. I can only talk for the UK, which is where I'm from. You walk into a beer here, there's generally a generic lager, a pint of Guinness, or 2 ciders, and that's what you've got to choose from. If you're lucky, they'll have a best bitter or a cask beer. So if you like drinking different beer styles, you end up either having to go to very expensive specialist beer shops or brew it yourself. And at the time I started getting into beer, I was on a very tight budget. So the only way I could actually drink all these different exciting beers was to brew them myself. So that's what I started doing. Started, as many people do, with what we affectionately call kit and kilo. You get the little kilo of kit of syrup, pour that in, a kilo of sugar, and about 19 litres of water. And a week later, you've got something drinkable. And that was my start in brewing. It was to try different beers that I couldn't get otherwise. From there, I moved on to actually doing all grain brewing and decided I really like this. Started investing more time in it, learning to get better at it, trying different beers, different recipes, different styles. And that's when I got to the point where it's like, actually, I'm really enjoying this. I want to help other people do better. So that's when I started becoming a beer judge through the BJCP and helping other people brew better beer and helping share my knowledge of different styles and different brewing techniques. So that was my background and introduction.
Cool. How about you, Carolina?
Bueno, a mí lo que me motiva en este mundo artesanal es toda la creatividad que se pone. Me gusta mucho la educación cervecera.
Well, what motivates Carolina in the craft beer world is all the creativity that comes with it. And she's really into education. Actually, she is an educator. Maybe, can I add, Carolina, that you have, I know she's really low profile, but can I add that she have postgraduate studies in quality engineer and in education in virtual environments, which right now is the thing, you know.
Si conmigo se entrenaron todos absolutamente todos los cerveceros de Argentina.
She had trained every brewer in Argentina. I'm not kidding. Every brewer know her. Also,
me gusta
a teacher for us.
Yes.
So we have a celebrity on board, is what we're saying.
Yes.
Yeah. She wouldn't say it because she, as other women, awesome women in the beer industry in Argentina, she's really low profile. Maybe
Thank you.
because of what you said before, but we don't have like stars. Like we have
Only
them,
one thing.
Yeah.
Una sola cosa. En el 2009, o sea, me puse a pensar cómo los ponía a estudiar para mejorar el mercado de consumidores y el mercado de cerveza en Argentina. Entonces, el examen del BJCP fue realmente la herramienta que dio un salto de calidad en el país.
Okay, yeah, in 2009, what she did was she tried to figure out how to improve the market, the beer market, and the BJCP exam that they took really gave us like a gap in quality, and a major improvement in beer quality in the beer market, because before that everyone was crafting their own beers, but they really improved the quality of the products after they took the BJCP exam. And Carolina's goal was to educate those brewers to make them brew better beers. That's the goal, the main goal. Is that okay?
Yeah, yes, thank you. And Rebecca.
Sorry, I'm okay. Sorry, I'm reading the chat that is difficult to understand. Maybe I should try to speak louder. You can hear me all right, or maybe I try to enunciate like
that. Yeah, that sounds better.
Fine.
That sounds better. Sure.
Yeah.
But
pardon my
French. Rebecca, thank you.
No, that's okay. Very similar discovery, very much like Sarah in terms of availability of beers, particularly being in a regional area. In New South Wales, particularly taps are dominated, again, like Sarah. I think we're very similar in models in pubs that taps are owned and sewn up by major international brewers, and you have a choice of 4 styles. So being the curious cat that I am, wanting to drink other beers, again, the same thing, there was nowhere in our area. So it's if you want something different, it's either when you're traveling, you try and find a bottle shop that might have some different beers that are brewed either around the country or internationally. So either that or online, and it costs a fortune. And there's now someone at the retail end. Yes, it's really hard to get access to beers. So long story short, very much again the same Cooper's kits, which I think have made their way around the world. Extract brewing, very much too, because I'm a cook, and part of a business that I had before, I was doing of all things spice mixes and blends for people. So playing with flavour is a really fun thing for me to do, and sharing. That's the other part of it. It's wanting to share other flavours with my friends and with my family, because we entertain a lot. So just introducing things to people. So brewing gave me a way to do that. So then I fell down the rabbit hole. Once I started brewing beers, we have a 50-50 success rate of good or bad, and well-intentioned friends saying, that's great, Beck, that's great. And it was something horrible that I'd made some horrible golden ale. But then that led me down the path of saying, I really enjoy doing this. I'm going to see if I can fall in love with the romance of doing it all grain. So that's what led me down that is basically the sharing experience, which is the biggest kick that I get out professionally and at home as well by brewing my own beers. So I think that's a very similar to a lot of people. Yeah.
Great. In terms of the what sort of the culture of home brewing is like in your respective countries. It'd be really interesting to see maybe what similarities, overlaps, or even differences there are. And I wondered if you could each speak maybe just for a minute or two on your thoughts or your observations about the wider female participation in the hobby of home brewing in your respective countries. So maybe we'll just keep going in the order. Sarah, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. I'm quite active in online communities and also in the in-person communities in the UK. So I get to see a good mix of what's going on with regard to genders. I'd say we're somewhere between 2 and 5% female participation or female identified participation in the UK. We're seeing at beer events, obviously the past year there hasn't been any, but normally at like homebrewing events like BrewCon, we'll have anything up to 20% females turn up. However, obviously it's hard to say how many have come with a partner and how many are actually involved themselves. But when it comes to online groups and homebrew clubs, it tends to be between 2 and 5%. It's nice to say that we've grown as a homebrew community immensely over the past year. Everyone got into lockdown. It was a lot harder to buy beer, and a lot of people discovered the hobby. They had more time to brew. They had more time to spend on hobbies, and everyone started brewing. So many of our groups nearly doubled in size over the past year. But again, it was a very low number of females compared to males. And it's always great when we see more women doing things and standing up and being counted for what they're doing. And I'm very much, part of my motivation for getting involved in things like this and for my YouTube channel is if no one sees women doing these things, it's a lot harder for them to make that bridge into standing up and doing it and being visible themselves. So it's a case of me standing up and saying, hey, I can do it. You can do it. Let's do it together.
I can hear you.
And Carolina, what's the home brewing scene like for women in Argentina?
Okay.
Carolina, tus pensamientos sobre la participación femenina en Argentina.
Bueno, en la Argentina, todo lo que es el movimiento de mujeres dentro de las cervecerías ha crecido año a año. Como hobby, lo veo más desde el punto de vista que la mujer se ha metido más profundamente en la industria craft, y el movimiento como hobby es menor, lo veo menos al 1%.
Okay. So the women's movement in craft beer industry have been growing greatly for the last years, but as a hobby, she says the participation is less than 1%.
Respecto a la cantidad del hobby.
Yeah, but in the craft beer industry, you see more participation.
Si dentro de la industria, por los números que tengo, generalmente trabajan en control de calidad y marketing, alrededor del 2 o 3%, puede llegar a ser el 5% ahora.
2 or 3%, maybe 5% right now, and the most of them work in quality control and in marketing in the craft beer industry, not as a hobby.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And how about in Australia, Rebecca?
Look, the latest figures, I actually did a bit of reading about this week because, just from an observational point of view, there's not a lot of women involved in home brewing. The latest figure I could dig up was back in 2017. Less than 2% of all home brewers in Australia are women. And it's something that's immediately obvious. As I mentioned, I'm in a regional town, so there's no local homebrew groups. You might have a bunch of, groups of friends that get together, but there's no real groups that come together to brew. So my only interaction, generally speaking, is through Facebook groups and either Instagram accounts, and just noting that, it's really quite interesting to see, as Carolina was mentioning as well, the participation rate in the industry tends to be, most of the reps and brand ambassadors, as they're now called, come into the store are women. Now, that could be for a specific reason that I don't necessarily want to put on breweries without mentioning. I think we know what that would be, why they come in to sell you beer. Having said that, we have got a great local brewery. Kathleen would be aware of the brand, I don't know, Stone and Wood Brewing, which is in Byron Bay, very close to where I live. The participation rate in terms of brewing staff there is quite high. So I would without having an official figure in front of me, I would have to say that at least 25 to 30% of that brew team are women, which for a lot of businesses, it doesn't sound a lot, but, for a lot of businesses, that's quite high. So, no, homebrew level for female participation in Australia is quite low, which is why I was excited about joining an event like this and trying to raise awareness in my own community about brewing for women.
This is really fascinating, actually, that all of you said at least around 2%, 1% involvement, which maps on exactly to the numbers that I have identified in the industry at large on the production side, at least in ownership and head brewing roles. So it does seem like there's quite a parallel between the rate of home brewing and the rate of the production side of things. Because as you mentioned, it's true as well in my research. I've also found that sales, marketing, branding, the more social jobs tend to be where women end up. And we could talk about, that at some other point. But in terms of maybe unpacking a little bit about why this might be the case, what barriers to entry are there for women in homebrewing specifically that might prevent women from becoming homebrewers or taking that up as a hobby, whether or not that leads on to professional gigs or not? Maybe we'll go in a reverse this time. Rebecca, we could start with you. So barriers to entry.
Sure. Well, as mentioned before, particularly Australia being such a disconnected country, we've got highly populated areas. If you don't live in dense cities or towns, the opportunity to join clubs on a one-on-one level is quite difficult. There are a few opportunities to do that, so that would be a major one. So say in my local area, within an hour's drive, we've got 2 homebrew shops. One of them is owned by a woman, but generally speaking, I think women don't feel comfortable in these very, to use the Australian term, blokey environments, because they don't, you walk into the brew shop and you will be the only woman, generally speaking. If you go to pick up supplies, you're the only woman. So I think it's a comfort level unless someone's being taken along by their husband to go or partner to go and pick something up. And I would also say that in terms of locally based social media groups, again, dominated in numbers by men. And I think a lot of women, just in the way that social media groups tend to, at some point, diverge into very boy jokey, jocular kind of conversations that I think women don't feel comfortable with, shouldn't feel comfortable with. So therefore just don't tend to participate. I can list off a number of groups, which I won't name publicly, that I've left for that very reason, is that it just is a lot of inappropriate talking that's not just about homebrewing and sharing with everybody. Which is not to say that there aren't men that aren't incredibly welcoming. I don't mean that for a second, but I think that's a massive barrier, and probably like that across the world, I should imagine.
Yeah, thank you. Carolina, how about you? Barriers to entry in Argentina.
¿Había barreras de entrada en Argentina para vos cerveceros?
Mire, mi caso es especial, o sea, yo puedo porque yo comencé como educadora. Entonces, no vi una barrera específicamente en mí, pero por lo que veo en los clubes, sí existen barreras para entrar en el mundo de la cerveza.
Okay, so in her case, it's different because she entered the craft beer world as an educator, so there wasn't like an actual barrier for her. On the contrary, they wanted her to be inside. But as the homebrew clubs in Argentina, she sees that there are barriers to enter.
Es por
lo mismo que comentaba Rebeca.
Sí. Por los comentarios. Los comentarios, sí. Por los comentarios en los grupos de mujeres cerveceras.
Yeah, because of the comments that she heard or read in the groups of women in craft beer, they had the same experience as Rebecca told before.
And turning it over to Sarah.
I've seen very similar in social media groups. There does tend to be a very, I think it was blokey environment was the term Rebecca used, which is a very good term for it. I'm actually an admin in several groups, and we try to keep them as inclusive and welcoming as possible. Unfortunately, now and again, we do have to employ the banhammer to try and enforce that. And that's a shame. In the UK, there's definitely a certain strata of age where people are rather sexist. It's unfortunately a part of the culture here in the UK that growing up, we went through a period where that was the social norm, and some people have just never learned to move on from that. You get all the people who are 40 or younger who can get absolutely horrified when someone who's 60 or something says something. And I can see Rebecca's totally in agreement, because obviously there's a lot of correlation between the UK and Australia in this regard. There's some groups that are managed better than others in social media, and that can very much pollute women's attitudes to what the homebrew community is like, and very much turn them off from it. When it comes to homebrew shops over here, we've got some absolutely amazing ones that are so welcoming to anyone. And we do, unfortunately, have some that are staffed by members of that generation where it's like, if you're a female identified person coming into the shop, then you better be buying it for your other half. Otherwise, they'll tell you what they think. And unfortunately, that is very much a barrier to entry in this country. We're trying to do better. Some of us are very passionate about doing better. People of all genders will stand up for the rights of women to homebrew, to do what they want, and for it not to be such a blokey environment. Unfortunately, some people start pushing back, saying this is all political correctness gone mad and all that sort of thing. Take your pick. I mean, there are barriers to entry over here, and I hope and pray every day that every day we do a bit to make it better, not worse.
It's quite interesting from what I'm hearing then across all of your examples or your experiences, is that a key barrier to entry is really kind of the sort of the cultural experience, the sexism, the attitudes, the conversations that are quite exclusionary. And those are all sort of, very cultural things that seem like they could be changed hopefully at some point. I'm wondering, just to sort of move away from that a little bit, are there any actual like material barriers to constraint, whether it be financial or, lack of interest or knowledge in science, or access to educational materials, supplies, things of that nature? Sarah?
Definitely, I think. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead,
No,
Rebecca.
I was just going to say,
Rebecca,
a lot of women, find themselves quite time poor as well, and depending on how you brew, as those of us that brew, and even Kathleen with your kombucha, these things take time. They take time and they take space, and a lot of women, for whatever reason they have personally, at a personal level, whether it's family or work, find themselves time poor, and also potentially financially. The other thing I would also say is, it's just something I'm really passionate about, is women aren't drinking a lot of beer, by and large. They just don't. So they're not trying beers. They've tasted their partner's beer, their dad's beer, and had something horrible, and don't realise the depth of style. Often the comparison is to wine, how different a drinking experience can be with a beer. So I think too, getting women exposed to having tasting, things like that, I think is a bit of a barrier.
Excellent. And Sarah, did you want to comment on anything else?
Yeah, I was going to say much same as Rebecca. Women in the UK do tend, and I know we shouldn't generalise, but we do tend as a gender to have less spare time. It falls to us to do much of the things that seem to be beneath some men, and I say some men because some are brilliant, some are fabulous and support us all the way, but we do tend to have less time to do these things. We do have, especially from certain age groups here, we do have roles imposed upon us that are expected. And what I've started doing is saying that brewing is just cooking. And then suddenly they haven't got an argument anymore because they expect us to be doing that. So that's the way I tend to approach that and turn it back on them.
And Carolina, thank you. Carolina, do you have anything else to add? So we've heard women tend to be more time poor. There are certain gender roles and expectations that also factor in. Do you have any additional constraints that you might want to speak to?
¿Alguna otra barrera?
Bueno, pienso igual que Sara y Rebeca, o sea que una de las limitaciones que tienen las mujeres es el tiempo. No pueden dedicarle mucho tiempo porque generalmente se encargan de la familia y hay muchas que son jefas de hogar.
Yeah, same thing. Because women doesn't have as much time as men, because they have to take care of the house and the family, and sometimes they are the only ones running the house, but the only income in the house, so they don't have as much time.
Thank you. We have a couple questions from our attendees, and one of these seems to segue quite nicely from our discussion. And so I'll ask this first one from Amanda. Do you all have any suggestions on ways that we might attract more women to home brewing, especially home brewing clubs? And as an extension of that, are there things that you wish would have been extended to you when you were trying to enter the space, or even now? And Rebecca, perhaps we could start with you.
Look, I honestly think suggestion-wise, in terms of getting involvement, I think I'd love to see particularly homebrew shops, and this is, again, speaking from a regional experience and a national experience here in Australia. I can't speak for everybody, but brew shops. I'd love to see local brew shops getting involved in inviting women along, creating a space for them to show them how to brew. I think that's, and just how fun it can be. And again, whether that's a women's only event, not to be exclusionary at all, but I think just to make women feel safe in learning and feeling like they can be safe to ask questions. I think that's a massive step for people to take. Or maybe regionally for me, sorry, I keep talking about a regional level, but it is very different in smaller areas. I don't want to take up too much time, but having craft beer retailers too, this is something that I'm looking at doing through my business, is having a chat with women and asking them would they like to be involved in brewing, and just those different avenues that which aren't necessarily traditional, not just a homebrew shop, venues, all those sorts of things, to have women in women events.
Great, thank you. Carolina, how about you? Any suggestions about ways to attract more women to home brewing?
Es interesante lo que logran los grupos. Acá hay 2 grupos de mujeres numerosos en el movimiento cervecero. Y es como que pierden, pierden es como que están más acostumbradas a hablar, ¿cómo es la palabra? No me sale en español la palabra. La palabra es encourage. En inglés.
Well, easier for me.
I remember the word in English.
Not the Spanish.
Not the Spanish.
It's like a safe space. She said it's interesting. We have 2 large groups of women in Argentina, of women in craft beer industry, and it's really different how we express ourselves in those groups in comparison with groups that have men. And what she says, we feel more encouraged to speak in those groups. That's one way to make more women go into homebrewing. And may I ask what you wrote in the chat, Carolina, that you were training us to be judges, to be BJCP judges?
El año pasado, con la pandemia, hice una capacitación de más de 100 mujeres, o sea, de los 2 grupos grandes que hay de cerveceras, para entrenarlas para ser jueces, y porque, quieren aprender.
So she was writing that in the chat before, so that's why I bring it up. Last year, during the pandemic, she trained a group of 100 women. It's like our own road to 100 to be judges. And she did it all for free. We just had to make a donation to some organization that helps other women. So we need more women judges.
It's really fantastic. I just want to interject and say, but it's also a little bit troubling because not only have we already talked about how women have to take up more domestic labor in the home and we have less time to be home brewing, but now we also have to give more free labor to train one another, to bring each other into the fold, to have our own safe spaces. It just seems, you can kind of understand in a way how that itself becomes a bit of a barrier. But yeah, good on you for taking that up and offering that opportunity, Carolina. And yeah, Sarah, how about you?
It comes back for me to something I mentioned in the text chat on the side earlier. I was challenged some years ago when I mentioned the lack of women in the hobby, in the environment, and visible role models. And I was told, well, why don't you be that role model you want to see for someone else? And by being involved in events like this, showing other women that there's women out there doing this, it can actually be very empowering and help them come into the hobby and feel a bit more confidence about it. Several years ago, I did my BJCP exams and I was trained by a lovely chap in the group we were in. There was at least 3 other women. So 4 of us sat that exam. Since then, I know I've gone on and trained other judges. 2 of those were women. And I'm starting a live stream course next week training more people to become judges. And I would love for more women to get involved. Every year I run a homebrew competition, and there's normally about 10% female involvement. And most of those are stewards rather than judges. Every year I try to encourage more to become judges and actually get involved more in the judging and the assessing of the beer rather than the delivering it to the table, because we've all earned our seat at that table. It's not, even though it's a very blokey environment, the more of us that do it, the faster we correct that imbalance. So stand up and be counted.
Nice, thank you. So we have another question from the audience. This one comes from Meg Ellis. So shifting gears a little bit, what trends in women's beer tastes are you seeing in your areas? Whether those are anecdotes, from your own experience, or if they're supported by data. And this is a particularly interesting question to sort of see how what's popular where you live may be different from places like the US, which, arguably have a bit of a larger scene. So Rebecca, can we start with you? Let me unmute you.
Mine will be completely anecdotal.
That's
serving
okay.
and selling women, serving, because it's perhaps a good position to speak from being a retailer. Sour beers, modern sours, heavily fruited, quite puckeringly sour beers, not necessarily your traditional style of beers, are becoming incredibly popular with women, particularly the lower ABV end, that feel like, and also sours that would be more carbonated than you generally would find in a sour beer. So sours are massive for women from my sales point of view, and also seeing beer releases from breweries in Australia. You can almost hear behind it, this is our girl beer that we're releasing. It's where I love the movement and the hashtag. I don't know if it's made around the world. All beer is girl beer. The other style, I would say, yes. The other style, I would say, and I don't know why, but it also tends to be the complete opposite, sweeter beers. So dessert stouts. We're entering winter. So adjunct stouts and that style of beer is certainly something that's on the rise. But I won't mention hard seltzer in this group. Dare I address the elephant in the room in terms of popularity? But no, they're the styles. They're the styles that are really on the rise for women.
And how about in Argentina, Carolina? What are the common beer styles at the moment?
Can you translate, Dani?
For women,
sí,
yeah.
En Argentina preguntaban del público entre las mujeres qué estilos eran populares últimamente, de lo que vos sepas. Bueno, vos tomás de todo igual.
I prefer, no. Bueno, voy a hablar en español, sí. En general acá les gustan mucho lo que veo la tendencia en las mujeres que les gusta la cerveza, tienden a la CIPA. Les gusta el lúpulo. También las cervezas belgas. Yo personalmente, a mí me gusta los estilos tipo ácidos, porque son muy nobles para maridar.
What you see in general is that women like IPAs. They really like hops, and also, which one do you say? Belgians, right?
Belgian, yes.
But she personally likes the sours because they are great to pair with food.
And it's like wine.
And wine.
And wine, yeah.
No, it's like the wine. I prefer, for example, I like very much the oat brewing. The oat brewing style it's perfect. It's like it's similar in Malbec wine because we drink a lot of wine. This Argentina is a wine country.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And Sarah, how about you?
Here in the UK, the women generally get told at least once a month what beer they like by the latest brewery releasing the latest beer for women, which normally gets totally ignored by all the women because they like all beers. For instance, I'm routinely told that women only drink alcohol-free or low-alcohol beers. That's what I've been drinking tonight. Serpent Stout, Imperial Stout. I've been in the UK community. I've been given the respectable title of Queen of Stouts. I'm normally asked to come and talk about stout at event or Imperial Stout, but I can take any style and find a woman who loves it. There is no women's beer. All beer is women's beer, as Rebecca said.
And so when you go to homebrew, what is your sort of decision-making processes like around deciding what to brew? So I'm assuming you're not looking to brew with the trends at the time. So if you want to walk us through kind of your process about how do you decide what to brew when it's time to brew? Sarah, do you want to start?
For me, I don't get a lot of time. I've got a full-time job. I've got household responsibilities, so I'm quite time poor. When I get to brew, I tend to brew something that I think will be interesting for me and interesting for viewers on my channel. There's a story to tell. So often it is some new hop variety, some new malt variety, or just a different style that no one else is brewing. Because I'm quite style agnostic myself, I generally go for anything other than smoked beers. That's normally the only style I will say I would not like to judge this style at a competition, simply because I'm a super taster for smoking beer. I try it. To me personally, it tastes like the bottom of an ashtray. But anything other than that, I'm fine with. Sours, give me spice, herb, and vegetable, which is the one style most judges want to avoid. I'm quite fine with that. So I'm literally quite happy to brew whatever comes up. My partner used to like hoppy beers, IPAs, especially really citrus ones. So I used to alternate between a citrus IPA and whatever new hop there was or whatever new malt that I fancied just giving a try and see what it would do.
Cool. Carolina, how about you? How do you decide what to brew when you brew?
Generalmente yo hago, tengo un equipo chiquitito y hago para creatividad, para desarrollo de producto, cosas que me gustan y sobre todo crear sabores. Eso es lo que, lo que me gusta, lo que tengo en el momento y bueno, y hago el estilo que lleno de sabor, o sea, una explosión de sabor.
Well, that's difficult to translate. Well, she has a small batch equipment. It's 5 gallon or 20 liters. And she uses it for fun, for experimentation, and she tries like new flavors. She says when she makes her recipes like an explosion of flavors. That's the aim. So it depends on whatever she has over there and what she wants to experiment with.
Cool. And Rebecca?
I'd like to say that it's anything I feel like brewing, but because again, getting back to that social aspect of what I do tend to brew beers that I know that my friends and family like to drink, because I have the room at home to have multiple beers on tap at any one time. So generally there's an easy drinker, there might be a Kolsch or something like that on tap, which also trying to just want to work in using native ingredients in this country, we're incredibly blessed with some of our indigenous flavors. So working with them seasonally as well. So that's really exciting. So depending on what's flowering and what's in best flavor at any one time. And also seasonally, I mean, I'm a bit like Sarah. I do love my dark beers, and I can drink dark beers all year round. But our climate down here is incredibly, one way or the other, it's incredibly cold. Well, maybe not incredibly cold, but quite cold, or very, very, very hot. So depending on the season is what I'll be brewing. So say, for instance, tomorrow I'll be doing a double brew day. I'm going to do a black IPA or a Cascadian dark ale for those sticklers out there, as well as a red ale or red IPA. And they're quite citrus forward. I do love the juxtaposition of dark malts with citrus hops. So,
can I just ask a follow up on something you said about indigenous flavors? I was wondering if you could just give us some examples of maybe what some of the regionally popular either indigenous ingredients, flavors, or beer styles are. That might be interesting to talk about.
Absolutely. So we've got a lot of native ingredients, particularly those ones that are used in brewing, and not to say that this is the only source of flavour profile for native ingredients, but it's gum trees. So I know that gum trees grow in the Northern Hemisphere as well, but we've got types of flowering gum that will give you, or myrtle trees that will give you lemon flavours, a really spicy lemon flavour. Strawberry myrtle, which, as it sounds, aniseed myrtle. So all of those ingredients, we can use them either in tinctures or just using whole leaf at the end of the boil. Also seed-based ingredients. So there's a fantastic wattle seed. So the seed of the wattle, it's often used in colas and in sweet syrups. So it gives a very caramel, malty, cola flavour to beer, so it gets used a lot in dark beers. And one of the big things regionally, we're in an area where the finger lime grows, and if no one's familiar with what a finger lime looks like, it is the fruit's anywhere from a couple of inches long generally. As it sounds, they have a lime flavour, but it's also kind of like a pithy, bitter flavour, which is really refreshing on the palate. If you were to cut a finger lime open, like segments of a citrus, they're little, people call them the pearls of citrus. You can squeeze the fruit and out pop these incredible little pearly lime flavours, and they're incredible. So that's really popular to use in, again, lighter beer styles, so in lagers and, lagers predominantly in pale ales, really crisp, like XPAs or things like that. So that's something that's really popular, and major breweries are starting to use more, which is fantastic for Australia.
Cool. And how about in Argentina or the UK? Any indigenous or local native flavors, ingredients, styles that you want to comment on? Carolina, starting maybe with Argentina.
Bueno, Argentina es productora de cebada y también produce lúpulo. Entonces tenemos grandes ingredientes y se desarrollaron estilos locales con los ingredientes que tenemos. Por ejemplo, dorada pampeana es uno de los estilos que se hace con ingredientes locales, que en realidad por el Cascade americano que crece en Argentina tiene un perfil totalmente distinto. Can you translate?
Yeah. So Argentina produces two-row barley and also hops. We have two regional styles that originated with the use of native ingredients. We have the Dorada Pampeana and the IPA Argentina. You can find them in the BJCP. And you were saying that the Cascade that we have back there has like a grapefruit citrus profile that's different from the one that you have or we have in the United States.
Awesome. Sarah?
We've got a very strange brewing culture over here. There tends to be what most of us refer to as boring brown beer. So bitter, best bitter, extra special bitter. It's what we're known for. That a lot of the classic beers that people have experienced originated here. Beyond that, we've got what we call gimmick beers, where there's some sort of brewery who's decided it would be a good idea to put something like Barra Brith, which is a seaweed bread from South Wales, into beer, and they think that's a good idea, with the emphasis being on the word think. But other than that, what most people here brew either tends to be imported from America, so your big American IPAs, your dippers, your tippers, your quads, or Belgian beers. I mean, there's obviously all the Belgian beers and Saison. That's always huge over here. We either have boring brown beers or someone else's beer. We don't tend to have much by way of indigenous ingredients here.
Interesting. Thank you. It just dawned on me that actually I think we are over time. I think we started a little late, so the live broadcast feed is a little bit slower than I thought. So I guess we should wrap it up. But are there any of you have any final comments you'd like to make, or anything that I didn't ask that you really wanted to get out there about an international perspective on home brewing?
I'd just like to encourage everyone here, once again, to get out and be the change you want to see. The more women people see doing brewing, drinking beer, the more women will feel comfortable to do it. Every one of us has got a part to play in doing that.
Yo pienso que los clubes de mujeres en Argentina están haciendo un gran trabajo y creo que es un semillero para que el movimiento crezca. O sea, lo que hacen es fortalece la confianza de las mujeres unas a otras. Can you translate?
Yeah. Well, she said the homebrew clubs in Argentina are making like a huge difference. They made like a seedbed of really promising women doing amazing stuff, and they build confidence between them.
And then Rebecca, anything you want to close out with?
Yeah, I'd like to finish up with just saying, seek out, as Sarah said, be the change that you want to see, and that's something that later in my life I've grown more comfortable with and am feeling more passionate about. So I'd really urge you to follow, particularly Sarah. I've been a bit of a fangirl lurking from behind of Sarah's YouTube channel for quite some time. So yeah, look at your social media resources, look at YouTube, look up these channels, scroll back through the comments and you can see some of our links to our pages. Look through Facebook. There's plenty of groups for you to have a look, see at, and feel comfortable and welcome. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I did link to where people can find you, and it probably is also in your bio here for the summit. But before I let everyone go, I just wanted to extend a huge thank you to our speakers for today, Sarah, Rebecca, Carolina, and Daniela. Thank you so much for presenting, for translating, Daniela. Thanks also to Grainfather and BSG for sponsoring the event and organizing the panel and for inviting me on as a non-home brewer. And just a reminder as well that this event was recorded and it'll be available to replay a few minutes after the live broadcast ends at this very same link. And that is it. Thank you so much for joining us today and for the great questions from the audience. Keep on doing the good work. And we'll see you again sometime, somewhere.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.